In this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we speak with Radware to get an update on the pace of current NFV and SDN development and deployment, of what challenges the industry continues to struggle with. All right, well, thanks for joining us today. My name is Dan Meyer. I'm editor-in-chief here at RCR Wireless News. And today we're joined by Frank Yue, who's the Director of Application Delivery Solutions at Radware, to talk a bit about the company and about some innovation in the NFV and telecom SDN space. So, hey, Frank, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
Very good. Yeah, and I will say Frank was one of our first guests way back last year on the show, so it's good to have Frank back in with us. So we definitely appreciate that, Frank. But maybe we'll start off with, for those who don't know much about Radware, maybe a little background on the company and I guess how you guys kind of interact in the telecom space.
Sure, Dan. So Radware, what we do is we focus on application delivery and application performance on the network. And we do that in two main categories in terms of solutions. We provide application delivery solutions, so your typical load balancers, application delivery controllers, and devices to really improve the performance and reliability of the applications on the network. And we also have a very strong portfolio for security solutions, doing DDoS mitigation, application security on the network, and providing solutions like SSL mitigation, web application firewall, other pieces. And those tie very closely in what we're doing with the service providers in the telecom industry, because obviously there's a very big interest for the service providers to provide value-added services, provide a lot of content inspection capabilities and enhancements. And these solutions really tie in well with them to provide these large-scale solutions for their customers.
Very good. I know, yeah, like you said, you guys do a lot of work in terms of security, and I think we want to touch on that a little bit later as well. But again, like we said at the beginning, I know we spoke a little more than a year ago, and maybe start off with just maybe a little overview from you on, I guess, in terms of kind of the pace of deployment and development of kind of virtualized platforms in terms of the telecom space. I think we've seen still a lot of excitement from operators, from vendors out there in terms of this move towards software. I guess that's been kind of your general view over the past year, kind of what's happened in the space.
So I think it's very interesting. And I think we really need to go back to really October 2012 when the first NFV white paper was delivered by ETSI, the organization, and the different telecom operators. And there was a lot of hype, a lot of excitement when that was released. And obviously there's continues to be a lot of trending in that direction. And I think the hype cycle is still fairly near the peak, where people are very hot on NFV, SDN technologies for the telecom industry. There's a lot of interesting developments moving in that world. And honestly, I think it's moving faster than I expected. And that's because traditionally the telecom industry, as you know, is not the fastest moving beast on the planet. And so for us to go from 4 years ago to where we are today and everything that we're talking about, I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. I guess some of it, I mean, I know I've occasionally commented that it seems like it's been a while, things are kind of been moving slowly, but I guess in terms of telecom, it is almost like light speed, really, because you're right. I mean, telecom is very conservative and they don't do things unless they actually have to do things. And so I guess you're right in terms of what we've seen in the past, 3 to 4 years. I guess that's true. We have seen quite a bit of progress in regards to that. But I guess what are some of the bigger challenges you might see in the market, and maybe near-term challenges in terms of kind of continuing that push by operators to kind of move down those virtualization roads?
I think the biggest challenges today is how do you integrate the virtualization platforms and all the different components within this NFV architecture, because there are a lot of different pieces involved. It's a multi-vendor environment, obviously. There's the hardware, there's the software, and there's that big piece that's kind of like the elephant in the room, the orchestration layer on bringing all that together, right? Yeah. And how do you incorporate that? How do you tie that into your existing legacy infrastructure? Because it's not a quick remove and replace type solution that you have to deliver for these telecom providers. So you need to integrate this slowly and very focused in terms of how you determine which solutions you want to deploy your environment in a software-defined world, in a NFV-defined application environment, and then decide how do you want to branch it out to really get to the point where really and truly this whole EPC, the Evolved Packet Core, and the core networks of the telecom industry is primarily virtualized, which is, I think, our ultimate goal. But we are a long way from getting there.
Yeah, that's a good point on the orchestration aspect. I mean, I remember I did a report on orchestration, might have been 2 years ago now. And I remember at that time, it was a very difficult report to do because everybody was just pretty much saying that, hey, we really don't have much in terms of orchestration at this point, and it's just, we're still far away from that. Does it still seem like that is still that challenge? Is really trying to get everything kind of have a nice layer that we can really manage. Obviously legacy systems, the new systems, tie everything together into a coherent package for operators.
I think that really is the biggest challenge, because even though we've made a lot of progress, we have all these pseudo standards. We have OpenStack. We have what I call OpenStack Plus, which is what all the vendors added on their proprietary pieces. We have all the SDN technologies, Open Daylight, and all these other pieces to try to bring things together. We have these other organizations and multi-vendor organizations trying to bring things together, but it still is very targeted and piecemeal. Mm-hmm. So when we look at NFV deployments today, and we see announcements from various telecom vendors today, and I just saw one recently where they're saying they're deploying NFV SDN and is available for their customers to be able to use. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's really nice, but how much of that is really on the press release and how much is actually in the infrastructure, right? Because really and truly, when we look at what the telecom operators are doing in terms of deploying these NFV virtualized solutions, they are very specific, small, pointed projects.
Yeah.
And really, to get the orchestration and everything working right, you need to have all these tiny projects come together in one big cohesive unit. And I don't think we're there yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right. A lot of the announcements we've seen to this point have been deployments that have been very siloed. I mean, very small segments they're going after. They don't want to kind of, branch this out to wider parts of the network because they're not comfortable yet with what's going to happen out there. So yeah, it's a very siloed approach still. And you're right, it does seem like the interoperability challenges are still out there, and obviously orchestration will help with that. But yeah, obviously a lot of work still needs to happen in terms of getting all those pieces together, getting everybody on the same page in terms of actual commercial deployments and support for this too. So still a lot happening.
That's exactly right. It's this point where you want the pieces, the whole goal, one of the big goals of the virtualization and the orchestration piece is getting the analytics and the big data to be able to determine the decisions and then automate those decisions so that the system automatically heals, or this self-healing network, or whatever you want to call it, to really work together. And that means that you need pieces that are within the IMS infrastructure to be able to impact and influence what happens in the EPC, which impacts and influences what happens on the RAN, et cetera, et cetera. But since we're still siloed, we don't have those interactions between these different groups.
Yeah, you're right. It does seem like real-time and automation are two key words for a lot of this. And, we're getting there, it seems like. I mean, real-time, we're starting to see some of that. I mean, near real-time is close, but we do have that real-time part of it. And then automation is obviously going to be a big part of that because, like you said, if the network finds something on the network that needs to be changed, it has to happen. You want it to happen automatically because you don't want to have to go through a process of somebody having to approve it, push a button, then go on the network. Because by that point, you might have an issue somewhere down the line, and that impacts network quality and service levels and things like that too. So yeah, still a lot of work, it seems like, in terms of getting those all lined up. Absolutely
right. And now one more comment on this is really when I look at this, and the reasons the telecom provider operators are moving in this direction is really, I like to say, we're trying to take this concept of the cloud and virtualization and bring it to the telecom core network infrastructure. So we're taking the cloud and creating a cloud within the infrastructure for the telecom providers. And the reason is because the benefits of the cloud, I think, besides the cost savings, and cost savings is a hit or miss, and we'll kind of set that aside because that's a whole nother mess. But the technical and operational benefits are really the agility and elasticity. And those are the cloud terms. Agility meaning the ability to add and remove services and applications quickly and easily. And elasticity meaning on-demand resourcing, to be able to scale those resources as needed on demand for those services on a timely basis and a geographic basis. And to do that, again, you need our orchestration engine, you need all those pieces to tie together, and ultimately you need all those pieces to come together. And this is why Radware is in this industry, is because we focus on application delivery. And application delivery is all about load balancing, other aspects, value-added aspects related to that piece, but it's all about making sure the applications are there and the resources are available, and we can scale that properly. So for us, our stance is that the application delivery infrastructure that we deliver in the private and public cloud sector integrates directly into the core infrastructure of the NFV technology.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Well, I guess maybe staying on what you guys do a lot of focus on. I know security is a big part of what you guys are looking at as well. And I know here, we've been doing a few stories recently on kind of security aspects of this movement towards cloud. I guess what sort of challenges are there in terms of making sure that everything is secured to a level that telecom is used to and is comfortable with as they move towards the cloud? Because it does seem like, maybe in a private cloud environment, which is maybe what most operators are used to working in, obviously security is much easier to control, but as they kind of bring on some public cloud aspects, security is always kind of a little bit of a concern of a challenge. I guess, how do you view kind of balancing out those types of concerns with the need to kind of bring on the more cost-effective methods of private cloud or of public cloud?
I think there are two key challenges that we need to look at when we look at how do we manage security in this cloud-like environment. And number one is, now that you have data and information flying across different parts of the network you don't have control over, may not have control over, how do you maintain the integrity of that information across those aspects that you don't have control? In public cloud, for example, I may not own the hardware and software infrastructure that my applications and data reside on. So what assurances do I have to make sure to know that my data is being protected properly? How do I know that if this public provider has a breach, that it does not, in fact, impact the integrity of my data? So I need to put additional insurances or additional technology or solutions on top of what I'm doing within the public cloud infrastructure and this cloud infrastructure to ensure that my data is protected. And that includes encryption technologies, other types of technologies, other things that we can do to enhance that. The second piece is, as we move to these cloud technologies, is that there's a big issue with standardization, as we know in the telecom in general.
Yes.
But if I'm using multiple areas, I'm using multiple public providers, or I'm using a combination of public and private, I'm using a combination of different vendors in the NFV environment, then is my security policy defined once and applied globally? Or do I have to define it 10 different times for each different instance that I have to put it into? Because the way they manage their policies are going to be different. And that becomes a big administrative mess that we need to understand and properly manage.
I guess, is progress being made in terms of that? Because you're right, it does seem like, that's kind of the whole purpose of going to this virtualized platform, this virtualized world is, write something once and it works everywhere. But again, the standards is always kind of out there. I mean, are we making progress to I guess, overcoming that hurdle, or are there so many new entrants coming into the space and so many new ideas that it makes it, are we almost making it more difficult today than it was in the past because there are so many more ideas now out there?
I think it's the latter.
Okay.
Because right now there are a lot of new players, there are not a lot of new entrants, and even in the orchestration space, for example, there are a lot of players that are popping up on the scene, making a name for themselves or trying to make a name for themselves, saying, we can provide orchestration for a multi-vendor environment. How true that is and how, good their integration is, it remains to be seen, right? But you have those pieces out there. So I think people are starting to become aware of the problem. Now the problem is, how long is it going to take us to develop solutions where we can execute to fix those problems? And standards is one piece, but as again, in the telecom industry, standards are slow to develop. And as we know, standards always get modified by the vendors. Yeah. So we need to be able to be very conscious as we implement these technologies to make sure that, yes, we know that there are these issues and this is how we're going to mitigate these issues. And even though we have these issues, the overall benefits of this NFV and virtualized technology still outweigh these issues that we need to add on into it.
Yeah, that's good. And obviously, I know most operators and vendors are looking towards an open source type of environment for all of this. But in general, historically, open source has been not opposite of standards, but there's been, it's always kind of an awkward kind of situation when you want to have things that can constantly be updated and changed. But at some point, you have to kind of, write something down in pen and give it to somebody and say, hey, here's something we're looking at doing right now. It's somewhat of a fixed standard right now. Is that still kind of a bit of a challenge, kind of balancing the need to keep things somewhat flexible and open, but also at some point giving somebody who's doing code or an operator, something that's somewhat solid and say, hey, you can move forward with this and be comfortable with what this is for the next couple of months as opposed to a couple of weeks?
We could have a whole nother conversation just talking about open standards and the issues with open standards and how we implement them. But in a nutshell, open standards, I think, are in general the way to go because, again, it has to be a multi-vendor environment. And if you're going to be a multi-vendor environment for this NFV architecture, because not everybody's going to own all the pieces end to end, from the NFV infrastructure for the compute and the storage and the networking, all the way to the VNFs and the orchestration engine, almost no one vendor is going to own all the pieces end to end. So it has to be a multi-vendor environment. And the only way to get a multi-vendor environment to play nice, really and truly, is some sort of open standard type of solution. So there are going to be some battles getting these open standards and these de facto standards built, but I'm also going to propose something else. Instead of just going with open standards, I always like to use the term open but proprietary. Mm-hmm. In other words, have a vendor create a standard and have that standard be reasonable and acceptable for the general community, but for them to open it up so that everybody can utilize it.
Interesting.
And here's an advantage for this, is that one of the problems with open standards is, with so many people and pieces in the pie managing and developing and dealing with these open standards and all the flaws and everything with that process, to be vendor supported makes it a lot more efficient in the long run.
Yeah. That's interesting. I guess it makes sense for a vendor to drive that, or does it make sense for maybe an operator to drive that? Because it does seem like, at least here in the US, I know like some of the larger operators are looking to kind of push, not necessarily their own agenda, but they're putting a lot of software out there. AT&T, I think we've all seen, have done quite a bit in terms of, using some of their stuff and putting it out into open standards as well. I mean, does it make sense for that to be vendor driven or carrier driven, do you think?
I think it makes sense for the carriers to dictate the direction,
okay,
but ultimately for the ownership to be with the vendors. And the vendor could be a multi-vendor consortium, but somehow the vendors need to own it. Because here's the other problem with the open source is, having myself been working with and working in the telecom industry for many years, the telecom industry in general does not like doing one-off customization of their packages for their internal things, because then they have to have the team to manage and support it and change it. And when that team people leave and change jobs, then they have lack of capabilities. So it makes a lot of sense to have the vendor ultimately own it, but obviously the direction has to be dictated by the operators.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. It will be quite a bit, definitely a lot of work that I know, obviously vendors, at least publicly state that they're always working together on these things, but I think, behind the scenes, you never quite know how interactive and how much work there actually is happening between the vendors. But hopefully things like those, open consortiums like OPNFV and Open Daylight and things like that are helping the process, I'm guessing, along, kind of moving it along a little bit at least.
Absolutely. I think that is the direction. Taking things, and OpenStack, I think, is a good example, where OpenStack is a fairly good standard, but then you have everybody else. You have Cisco with their ACI and APIC, and they've done little tweaks. HP with their service director, they've done little tweaks here and there. And then you have Alcatel-Lucent Cloudband, and they've done their own tweaks to the OpenStack. So it's, again, I like to call it OpenStack Plus. It's OpenStack, but it's proprietary. Yeah. But, really and truly, the telecom operators, they're used to that. When we talk about other standards that we have in the telecom industry, and I'll use a great example, Diameter Protocol. Diameter is a great standard, but I'll tell you, every single vendor uses a slightly different implementation.
It's always a secret sauce you have to put in there to kind of make it a little different, a little unique in the marketplace. But you can't blame them. And obviously, a lot of these things do make it a better platform. I mean, you can't deny that what they're doing is not beneficial. But you're right, it is kind of a little bit of the plus kind of thing on top of everything, which is, always adds a little bit of a drama to everything. But I guess that's what we're kind of get used to at this point. So
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe looking forward a little bit. I mean, what are, I guess some of the challenges you see maybe moving forward in terms of, what hurdles need to be kind of overcome? I know we mentioned orchestration as a big part of this going forward. I guess what else do you see out there is kind of maybe needed to be tackled, not just in terms of virtualization, the basics there, but also in terms of security too. What are some of the challenges you see kind of moving forward that need to be tackled?
So I think I want to touch on 2 points in terms of futures, and one ties a little into the orchestration, and that becomes the big data analytics, the heuristics that ties into orchestration, because the orchestration really can't automate and do things properly unless it has the information to make those decisions. And the big data is going to be a huge challenge. We're not there yet, and I think we're still at least 2 years plus away from what I can see from the industry in terms of where we're going, where we're able to collect multiple data points of different technologies. So we have our networking type technologies with our IP fix and our S-flow and our net flow and other types of network stats. We have our application layer stats. We have our signaling stats like the diameter signaling messaging. We have our RAN messaging. We have all these other pieces. We have DNS. We have all these other pieces to collect them. And they all interact and relate, but how? And we need to get the intelligence that can say, okay, I'm getting all these pieces of information. What does it mean? And what it means is going to be different based on the different operator's environment. So it needs to be intelligent. It needs to be smart to be able to make these decisions dynamically, organically, and then make the decisions based on the policies that you define to make these changes in the environment. That's going to be the true, I think, end goal of what we're trying to do in terms of this orchestration and this big picture of this virtualization ecosystem that this operator's core network is going to become. And I like to joke, this is my version of Skynet.
Nice Terminator reference. I like that. That's always, you're right. It's true. But you're right. And that's kind of what it's a bit like. It's something that's going to be kind of controlling everything. And hopefully it doesn't go down that road. But,
exactly.
It's always part of it. You never know.
It's not going to kill everybody on the planet. This is a beneficial Skynet.
This is the good Skynet. If Skynet was a good thing, this is what we're going to hopefully look for. So
exactly. And the second piece is security. Security is becoming bigger, and it's. I know the operators want to avoid getting into the payloads and the content and becoming the editorial decision maker in terms of being able to decrypt the content and look at it, because there are a lot of legal and other ramifications doing so. But having said that, security is a big piece, especially as they start owning applications and start owning these value-added services to their customers. So if they're doing things like video optimization or parental controls as value-added services to the customers, obviously they need to maintain that security aspect within those services they provide. So that's one piece. And the other piece that's becoming bigger and is less complicated in terms of application level, but just the fact that these DDoS attacks that we're now seeing hundreds of gigabits of attacks going across the network. Can the telecom provider, because they are the choke point to the end between the application / internet and the end user, can they control and manage those attacks? Well, the first question is, should they? Because I think a lot of them are taking the hands-off approach on, hey, it's just data going through my network. I'm just going to let it go to its endpoint.
Yeah.
But really and truly, I think in the best interest of the internet community, I think the telecom operators need to look more at these DDoS attacks and these security attacks at the network layer and say, I have a responsibility to protect my end users and applications, even though I'm not the controlling point. Because they are so large that only those telecom operators, I think, are in a position to be able to do something effectively against them.
Yeah, that's a good point. It does seem like, with more and more traffic traveling over the internet, and a lot of this traffic, whether it's mobile or fixed, going through these, specific number of telecom operators, you're right. It does seem like they are being put into a position that, they probably don't want to really be in, because the regulatory aspects, when you look at, security issues, and that becomes a country by country almost kind of thing as well. Those are, challenges and headaches that I'm sure are the least of their concerns. I mean, they're looking more at the bottom line and not having to worry about all those regulations. So yeah, that's going to be a tricky perspective for them going forward, how they're going to manage that. Because again, if it becomes a country by country basis, if a country wants to have, any sort of traffic over their networks hosted in that country, that's a whole another can of worms that's nobody wants to get involved in that, really. And
you bring up a good point. You say the regulations are done on a country-by-country basis, or maybe in the EU more on a multi-country basis, but really on a segmented basis based on that geographic region or population. But one of the problems we need to see and understand is that really and truly the traffic on the internet, we like to say it, and it's kind of a cliche, but it is global.
Yeah.
And the other aspect to keep in mind here is that almost all of the major operators are global. They are multinational organizations. So if they are going to implement a policy, preferably they're going to want to implement a policy across all of their properties at once, instead of just saying it only applies to this country.
Yeah. Well, again, if they have a good virtualized platform in place, they can manage their things a little easier too. So another reason to go virtualization. So there we go.
Absolutely. Another virtualization can make things a lot easier. But again, that ties into the orchestration and everything else, because you need to make sure you apply the right policies and services to the right location at the right time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Frank, I think we brought up way too many topics here, which could have lasted another 7 or 8 hours on this. So I think maybe this was a horrible interview just because I think we only opened up a tip of it, but perhaps it leads to maybe down the road we can do some more of these and maybe focus on some specific topics as well and kind of expand some more as well. But no, I think we definitely touched on, and you brought up a lot of great topics there, a lot of great insight into what's happening out in the space. And again, it's always good to catch up with someone who we spoke with, a little more than a year ago to kind of get some progress as well. So again, great talking to you again. Thanks so much for the great insight. And hopefully, like I said, we'll touch base again soon and see what's happening there at Radware. Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check out our next episode of NFV SDN Reality Check when we speak with Gigaspaces on using cloud platforms to bolster NFV orchestration efforts.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.